Hello, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Donna Gordon. I'm part of the membership team here at IIRSM. Before I hand over to Robert Bradley, your branch chair, I'm just going to run through a few things first. To begin with, you should see to the right of your screen a toolbar with various options. You will be on mute for the duration of the webinar. Feel free to ask questions, make comments using the question area, and we will take some time at the end to respond to these. If you need any support using the GoToWebinar system, the I symbol will take you to the support site. Finally, this webinar is being recorded and a copy of the recording will be placed on the IIRSM YouTube channel after the event. So that's enough from me. Rob, I'm now going to hand over to you.
Okay, thanks Donna, thanks very much and welcome everybody. Thank you ever so much for joining us. So as Donna mentioned, I'm the branch chair of the Yorkshire and Humber branch, and this is our first webinar, so very exciting. And in order to celebrate that, I've got a stellar lineup of speakers this afternoon, all looking very bright and happy this afternoon, and the sun's shining as well, so it can't be bad. Just before I introduce them though, I just wanted to sort of set the scene for today and why I've chosen this subject as the for our first webinar. When we first looked at this, we all know that IIRSM is concerned with risk management, and the interesting thing about risk management is that professionals in risk management work across a wide variety of different industries, but the raison d'etre is to find ways of improving business through effective management of risks. I strongly feel the unique challenges created by different industries present learning opportunities for all of us as to how we can manage risks better in our own industry. Hence, a subject that largely affects hospitality also has a direct daily impact on up to 10% of the population and their families and friends as well. So I thought it was an appropriate subject to discuss in a risk management setting. So we are talking about food allergies here, and there's no doubt over the last 10 years the awareness of the level of risk around food allergies has increased exponentially to a point where I now believe it's the biggest risk faced by hospitality business owners and operators. We're all aware of the tragic case of Natasha Ednan Laperouse, who died following an allergic reaction from a pret-a-manger sandwich, and actually resulted in a change in legislation which came in at the start of this month. But there's many other cases which have resulted in fatalities and serious illness which have not received anywhere near the same level of publicity as this one has. There was a case in 2017. 15-year-old Megan Lee died from irreversible brain damage on New Year's Day 2017 after she ordered a takeaway on Just Eat from a takeaway called the Royal Spice in Haslingden, Lancashire. The teenager and a friend ordered online through Just Eat 2 days earlier and wrote nuts, prawns in the comments and the notes section. The delivered meal, which included onion bhaji, a seekh kebab and a Peshwari naan, was later found to have the widespread presence of peanut protein. So a jury at Manchester Crown Court found the takeaway owner, Mohammed Abdul Qudus, and manager Harun Rashid guilty of unlawful killing by reason of gross negligence. The trial heard there was a litany of failings, in the words of the judge, in the kitchen, including poor hygiene and no records of ingredients. And Rashid was jailed for 3 years, and Qudus was jailed for 2 years in that case. Mrs. Justice Yip, who was a judge, said, "It's hoped the message is heard that those who fail to take proper care in the supply of food to the public will face significant custodial sentences if a death results. I hope this tragic case adds to the growing awareness in the food industry of what can happen if allergies are not taken seriously. Those who fail to heed the warnings and who continue to flout food safety regulations may find the courts taking a harsher view in the future." She said, "It may well be that a restaurateur who takes no action to manage allergens today would be regarded as blatantly disregarding a high risk." So I'm sure nobody who enters the hospitality industry ever considered that one day they could be convicted of manslaughter and sent to prison just for serving somebody a meal. But anyone who's worked in a school, particularly with catering experience, will be aware of just how many children now suffer from food allergies, estimated as between 3 and 6% globally. And hospital admissions due to allergies in the UK have increased steadily across all ages between 1998 and 2018, from 10 to 28 admissions per 100,000 of population per year, which is an increase of 179% over that period. The level of risk is high because in many cases it only requires a very small exposure to the allergy causing ingredient to cause a reaction, including traces passed in the air and on food which has been cooked to a high temperature, for example in a deep fat fryer. And we all know the equation of severity times likelihood equals risk, never more appropriate than in this case. Some restaurateurs have worked through the hierarchy of risk control, either consciously or unconsciously, when assessing risk from food allergies, and started with elimination by blatantly refusing to serve any customers who suffer from food allergies. There's a difficulty there in terms of, is that something that's discriminatory? Other companies have tried to introduce a disclaimer, getting customers who have allergies to sign a piece of paper saying they won't sue if the restaurant kills them. Most of this is driven by fear on behalf of the operator of causing illness or death of their customers. The current legislation requires food business operators to provide accurate information regarding the ingredients of their dishes available on request and to train their staff in food allergies. This puts a responsibility on the operator to take the matter seriously and a responsibility on the allergy sufferer to inform the operator of their particular condition. Is this enough? Does this adequately protect the food business operator if a consumer suffers an allergic reaction, and does it adequately protect the allergy sufferer? Is it fair to put chefs, restaurant managers and owners of food businesses at risk of potentially facing manslaughter prosecutions just for serving someone with a meal? I'd like to explore some more of the background to food allergies to understand some of the risk management challenges to the operators and whether more could be done to help people who are suffering with food allergies. So to discuss those matters, I have, as I said, a stellar lineup of speakers which who are in front of you today. I'd just like to introduce them to you. Firstly, Heather. So Heather, welcome. Heather is in Copenhagen at the moment, which is where she lives. She started working McDonald's age 16. It was about 5 years ago, right, Heather? Yeah. She graduated with a biology degree, moved to Australia to be a conservationist, and qualified as a dive master in New Zealand. This career path did take her to some wonderful places and a significant understanding of risk management with experience of first aid, remote working, advanced diving, self-rescue, and oxygen administration. She says she can also tag a stingray, microchip marsupials, and knows how to avoid snake, scorpion, or spider bites. Now, I will say at this point, she originates from Hull, and so those skills come in very handy, as you all know, for people in Hull. She returned to the UK in 2010, qualified as an environmental health practitioner, and got first-hand experience working at council as a placement as an environmental health assistant. She realised that she didn't really like being an enforcer. It wasn't really her bag, and much preferred being coaching and training and solving problems for people. And she's subsequently took up a role as a consultant and being an ambassador for dietary preferences. She worked on the 2012 Olympics as a food safety supervisor, and then she worked for a risk management company inspecting hotels around Europe, Iceland and Turkey. She's also got experience working in Michelin-star restaurants in London and various hospitality businesses across England. As I say, she now lives in Denmark and spends her time travelling across Denmark and Sweden for some of the biggest chains in the world. She says she'd like to spread the message of inclusivity and in the process save lives, improve compassion and happiness in the food retail industry. She wants it to become normal, mainstream, widespread, infectious, that these people are considered, and for the food outlet it should be straightforward, profitable and rewarding. She has aspirations to change the world, promoting safety and inclusivity. She strongly believes everyone should be able to eat out, be included, no matter their dietary preferences. As a vegan and also suffering from a food allergy herself, she says, if restaurants can serve me, then they can better serve all their customers, including allergy sufferers who are currently largely excluded from eating out. And that includes eating at work canteens, for example. To demonstrate her passion, she wrote a book. Get it up, Heather. Inclusive, the new exclusive, I beg your pardon. In a plea to implore hospitality operators to embrace the business opportunities around correctly managing the service of guests with food allergies. So Heather, can I just ask you first of all, so where do you think that we are at, your sort of experience working in the world of consultancy? Where do you think
I'd like to comment on the example you gave, Rob, where someone died, but they actually had a following incident after that death. So they showed that they couldn't care less that she'd died. And the problem was that they'd sort of substituted some type of nut that's normally in the meal for peanuts. So they'd actually done a bit of food, counterfeit food. So there were so many things. It was the lack of remorse, I think, that caused that huge sentence, when actually it should be more in the HACCP system and reducing risk as much as possible, that if someone does have an accident, there should be a due diligence defence. And I think that is what's scaring operators, is the unlimited fines, custodial sentences. It is quite a scary punishment, but surely if you are showing an honest, transparent ingredients list, you've trained your staff and you have a good HACCP system, especially for serving people with allergies, then you should be, protected from going to jail as well. So from the other side of the other perspective there. But what I find is that it's just widespread ignorance in the general population about allergies, and even some very high up directors and EHOs and directors of, primary authorities, I think they don't realise that milk can be a severe allergy. It's actually the biggest killer, and milk's in everything. And even if it's not in it, it's on it or contaminating it. So that especially with vegan food, which is my experience, because I had a severe allergy myself in 2019. I was in a hospital. The doctor told me, you've had a severe allergy. We think it might be milk. And I was thinking, but I'm vegan. I shouldn't be eating milk. And although I know all the may contains and traces of and these sort of things, I was also 35 when this happened. So it was a spontaneous severe allergy. I think it was just shocking how difficult it is to eat at all if you have a severe milk allergy. But it did turn out that there's also severe lactose intolerance, which is very, very common. So when you're talking about food safety and people, is it fair for operators to consider these people, and is it fair to have all these consequences? Well, it's very predictable that there'll be people in the population with a dietary preference, and it's very predictable that if you don't have a management of your ingredients, that they're at risk. And if you look at food safety law and vulnerable groups, that is who we're protecting with HACCP. It is people that might be susceptible to E. coli, like the elderly or the young or the pregnant, and pregnant ladies are protected from listeria. So why not the same for people with allergies, intolerances, celiac disease? Even religious beliefs or vegans have consequences if they eat something they're not used to eating. It is still causing harm, and there's also psychological well-being, which is included in health and safety in the workplace, that if people are excluded, it is social exclusion that in turn has mental health impact and impact on people's longevity. So if you have an allergy, although you might not die of it, your life will probably be worse compared to average. So there's a whole big mess of different perspectives there to consider.
Absolutely.
One of the things to consider is you'll have more customers if you're the only person serving them in your catchment.
So what you say is that if you can do this properly, if you can accept the fact that you're going to get people who have food allergies, and find a way of managing it correctly, then actually there's a significant advantage to that, which actually is the philosophy about risk management generally. You know, we always talk about this in, well, IIRSM talk about this as an ethos really, and the fact that health and safety is traditionally looked at as a bit of a blocker. You know, the old traditional health and safety man, you know, will say, oh no, you can't do that, it's health and safety, or people quote, oh no, can't, health and safety bloke says we can't do that sort of thing, can't use a ladder, or we can't lift that, move that load because it, you know, health and safety bloke says we can't shift it.
Extremely significant
risk management
is actually,
risk management is actually about finding ways of getting over challenges like that by managing properly and sort of breaking the tasks down and putting in proper controls in place in order to be able to ensure that you can deliver that safely, you know. So and what you're saying is that with that, and that's what you've argued obviously in your book as well, with that comes a competitive advantage in the fact that it gives people confidence, it gives customers confidence that of businesses where, you know, they can go to if they're confident that they're managing it correctly, then they're going to go back, and they're going to go back on a regular basis because they know they've had a good experience, and they can be confident that they're going to be well looked after and they're not going to become ill from eating in that establishment.
And I think from your perspective as risk management, you can never have zero risk, and that's what the free from label, or even not putting that there's the ingredient there, that's giving a fear. So if you don't have the disclaimer, there's the fear that you're claiming free from, which is unachievable because you can't even test if it's free from with a zero chance of risk, and there'll never be zero risk. So I think that's where the naming of free from, or the sort of general understanding of what you can label as containing or not containing, they just slap a disclaimer on. So when you're talking about signing a disclaimer, they actually put on the wall when you walk in, if you have an allergy, we can't guarantee, and they say everything is in everything. So that is discrimination. When they have a list of 14 allergens that might everything in our establishment may contain 14 allergens, if they then have no peanuts in any of their recipes, they should be fined for that, because it's just an act of discrimination against allergy sufferers, or even people with intolerances, or even people who just have an aversion or don't like eating a certain product.
So how do you feel about restaurants that actually blankly refuse to serve anybody who's got an allergy?
I think if they can't justify having a risk assessment, it's also the same with manufacturers. If they don't have the risk assessment, that's illegal. Because you have to anticipate that a big proportion of the population have food intolerances. Consumers have the right to know what's in their food. And as far as practical, you can manage allergies a lot better than the current status quo. And I think a tick sheet, as suggested by the Food Standards Agency, is massively inadequate.
Interesting. Can I I'm going to bring Jackie in on this, on this, because you've got some interesting experience as well on this, Jackie. So just again to introduce Jackie. By the way, before I introduce Jackie, please anybody, if you've got any questions, if you just put them into the box there, and we'll certainly fire them at our experts here. That will be absolutely brilliant. So Jackie's got loads of experience in skill and experience within the catering industry, and also in allergy management. So she was the former head of catering at Manchester Metropolitan University, and in 2018 the winner of the highly prestigious Free From Hero Award. Was Northwest Regional Chair of the University Catering Organisation, and was also branch secretary for the Institute of Hospitality. And over the last 2 years, she's been developing a passion for raising awareness about food allergies and intolerance across the food industry, and particularly within the sort of university and higher education sectors. She urged the team to support allergen awareness whilst highlighting particular difficulties of students who had allergies living away from home. Jackie challenged her team to remove one of the key allergens from their diet for 1 month to understand the problems that people with allergies face on a daily basis. This challenge highlighted the need to support customers and change the way the department managed allergens, also raising money for charity at the same time. She now runs Jack's Limited, which is a specialist allergen management and training consultancy. Jackie, I just one of the things that struck me on there, and one of the questions I had for you in particular, was some of the data that comes out from allergies is that young people in particular, and obviously that's where you've got a keen interest, young people who have food allergies are often very reluctant to admit to them. If they're out with a group of friends, and obviously this is, you know, in the university situation and so on, and then they're away from home and they're out with a group, they're forming new friendship groups and so on, and go out for a meal, they're often very reluctant to admit to suffering from food allergies. And this is well established data these days. How do you think, is that true in your experience, first of all, and how do you think that can be effectively managed? How can we manage that better?
So when I was head of catering, the law changed in 2014. So we had at the time 13 cafe bars and restaurants. I had 60 staff, permanent contracted staff, plus agency staff, plus students working for me. So I had a big training program to make sure that everybody knew what our legal requirements were. And then I attended a seminar where the speaker said that students living away from home for the first time with an allergy are the most vulnerable. And I thought, wow, that's my market, my customer base, 36,000 students at the time, and also 4,000 university staff. And that really struck home. And in fact, somebody, you know, kind of literally elbowed me and said, you need to do something about this. And I said, well, I will. And I kind of started a bit of a passion for that. And I went back to my team and I said, you do realise that our target market are the most vulnerable for the reasons you stated, that they don't want to be the one standing in the queue and saying, please, can I see the chef? I've got a few allergies. They'll just either not eat and eat somewhere else, so we've lost some of their income effectively, or they eat the wrong thing and then they're sick. They don't carry the EpiPens with them. If you're a young lad with skinny jeans and a t-shirt in the middle of summer, where do you put your EpiPen? Because you don't take it with you. So I was really quite keen to make sure that students could talk to us. So instead of that sign that said, if you've got allergies or intolerances, you know, basically we don't know what we're doing, which is what that sign says. We said, if you have allergies or intolerances, please speak to us. We're all trained and happy to help. And then we'll have the conversation about what do you need. We didn't have residential students we catered for. We had halls of residence, but they had their own kitchens. I was also mindful that in those kitchens, if there was somebody with severe allergy, you know, did they have something in place? And they didn't. So I also ran training courses for residential advisors who hadn't thought about it. If you're not in catering, if you don't have somebody with an allergy in your family or friends, it doesn't occur to you. So for 2 or 3 years consecutively, I ran information courses for those residential advisors, and they put plans in place, because you might need a separate fridge. You'll need a plan of action in case something happened, you know. So that was where my kind of understanding was kind of, you know, started from. And then bizarrely, my youngest daughter at age 14 years, and I've got 3 children grown up now, but at 14, I blamed Greggs. She went to Greggs in Manchester, bought some cookies with her friends, and came back and she said, Mum, do my lips look funny? They're all tingly. And yes, they did look funny. They weren't massively huge like you see in the pictures, but they were all bumpy and blistery. She didn't feel so well. Her face looked puffy and red. And I said it was probably something to do with cinnamon, because it was Christmas time. So we kind of, you know, be careful over Christmas, etc. But the next 6 months were really quite stressful for her and for me. She's quite ambitious. And she was doing GCSE course, and it seemed that whatever I gave her to eat, she was sick. So I took wheat out of her diet, and then tried to change the milk. But you know, I didn't realise the whole implications really. I was giving her oat milk, which she really enjoyed. Can have some like chocolate oat milk, but every morning she was throwing up. Being sent home from school, she was working from home before it was a thing. She used to put on a dressing gown and she'd get up and she'd say, I feel like I've not slept. And she'd end up working in a room. And for 6 months, we really couldn't pinpoint what it was. And then we had some tests done and she's severely gluten intolerant, she's lactose intolerant, no potatoes and no eggs. So at 14, no burger and chips for her. So we had to be quite inventive with the food. She did really well at school, got the GCSE she needed, went to college, was invited to Oxford University for a summer school for a week, sent all the information, and night one, she was ringing me up saying, I don't feel well, I need to come home. Teachers were panicking. And I said, fortunately, she's not anaphylactic, she's no EpiPen, but she's going to be ill for a few days. It does affect her for a few days. So she came home on the train. She said that was the worst journey I've ever experienced. She was throwing up all the way, you know, had to keep going to the toilets kind of thing. And she said, I'm not going away to university now because I don't know how to cater. And that was such a big insight remark to make, you know, that she could have, I'm not saying she would have got in at Oxford, but, you know, she could have gone anywhere, had that university experience. And I just thought, you know, there's probably lots of people like her where every day she has to think about where she's eating, taking snacks with her. So she's not anaphylactic, doesn't have an EpiPen. But if she has gluten, even the tiniest amount, it knocks her sideways for 2 or 3 days. So she went to Manchester University. She did politics and modern history. She found a voice and she will argue in restaurants if she's not happy. Now she's just started a master's now in political science. But the first year she purposely stayed at home. She said, you know, I'm not confident enough that they can feed me. So she went off with a packed lunch every day and lived at home. In fact, one night she was going out with a group of friends and I found her checking on Google which vodka didn't have potato in. So at least she was checking first. But years 2 and 3 she had and still got a shared house with her friends. But even there, in a small shared kitchen, the other week she rang me early in the morning. She should have been working. She works in hospitality as well in the university. And there'd been some cross-contamination in her kitchen and she literally had the most terrific headache, was vomiting, her legs gave way and she had to go back to bed. She seems to be getting much worse with it. So I then left my role and decided to kind of share my experience as a parent because, you know, you do worry and it's affected her, you know, for quite some time. She was 2 days in school, 3 days in bed, and 3 days in school, 2 days in bed, vice versa. Throughout exams, you know, our policy was, do you want chicken and rice or rice and chicken? Because we couldn't afford her to be ill. So we kept it very bland. And I share that experience from being in the kitchen. So in my experience, 30 years in the business, at the university, we had a directorate of 12. 8 of that directorate had dietary requirements. So we had to change our menus and make sure they were suitable for many rather than the few. So the main course was always gluten-free, vegetarian was often vegan, and we cater for the others individually to make it much easier. So I've done a lot of work recently in schools, a local council. I've trained 400 of that team, 80 of them on level 3 and 320 on level 2. And interestingly, I've just been away to a conference for LACER for school meals, and that council won an award, not because of the training, but because generally they're quite positive and upfront. And I always talk about a positive, proactive food allergen culture, because as Heather says, you know, you will have people coming to you. Be prepared for it. Don't be the person running around the kitchen and last minute saying, oh, we've got 3 gluten-free to cater for. You know that you're going to get gluten-free. And the comment about the disclaimer really infuriates me, because I always say in the training, yes, of course you've got allergens in your kitchen, unless you're completely allergen-free restaurant, but you'll buy milk to make a sauce, you'll buy flour, you'll buy bread, you'll buy butter, you'll buy cheese, but you put them all away. in you know, places you store them with, you know, you label them, and you don't accidentally, oops, I've spilt it all over the table. You have processes in place. You know, if you've got a good food safety policy, then you know that if you're doing allergen free, you'll prepare it somewhere else. You'll probably have a purple chopping board, you'll wash your hands, you'll do everything correctly. So, and by saying, you know, sign this disclaimer, when I go out to eat, if I have chicken, I don't say, I'm ordering chicken, but I understand the risk of salmonella. So I'm happy to accept, you know, if something happens to me, if I get food poisoning, I won't sue you. It's the same thing. You know, we're a professional caterer. If I can serve chicken correctly, why can't I serve that gluten-free correctly? It's the same
Can I
principle.
just jump in and say, if you've got a blanket disclaimer, people won't tell you they have an allergy. It's actually more dangerous to have a blanket disclaimer that says everything is everything. And several allergy sufferers have told me their doctors have said, just ignore main contains, just ignore disclaimers. They're not actual, when it doesn't actually mean the level of risk. Because some people have it on even though there's zero risk and they have no peanuts, for example, in the whole of their ingredients list. And in other places, they will try and serve someone with a severe milk allergy, even though they're a burger joint and everything's got cheese smunched on it.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't
really
make sense. So, yes, I do encourage a proactive culture. I do encourage talking. The communication is really important, as you said, with students or any customer. So it's a friendly sign. Come and talk to us. How can we help you? What are your allergies? And actually, what are your likes and dislikes? Because you know what? Hey ho, they don't like things as well, and that's okay. You know, because I think chefs get frustrated. You know, I've made this beautiful mushroom risotto and they hate mushrooms. If we'd have asked them first, we'd have known they hate mushrooms. So it's about that understanding and empathy, because at 14, you know, having had 14 years of eating whatever she wanted, I have to say out of the three of them, I'm glad it was her, because she's quite good at choosing different foods and she likes, you know, trying different foods. But having been able to eat everything to not be able to eat everything, she didn't wake up one morning and say, I think I'll make my life very difficult. I think I'll now not eat gluten. I won't eat lactose. I can't have potatoes. She didn't wake up like that. You know, she would much rather be able to eat what all her friends eat, but she can't.
Can I ask you a question, Jackie, about the potatoes, because they're not one of the 14? How do you find that for navigation?
Well, we have to obviously look at the ingredients. Now that Natasha's Law's come in, she can see ingredients and sandwiches. I have to say it's more of an intolerance, because if it's lower down on the list, because potato starch creeps into a lot of gluten-free things, if it's low on the list, she can manage, but if it's high on the list, she just suffer. And if it's actual potatoes in a dish, because once they put it into one of the restaurants, she said she was gluten-free and potato-free, but in the dish, she found potatoes at the bottom of the casserole type dish. And as she was eating it, she got really bad stomach pain. So potatoes, as in whole potato, she will suffer immediately. But if it's potato starch, it's less so.
Rob introduced some statistics earlier about children with allergies, when actually, if you look at the whole gradient, like Jackie just explained, that the Food Standards Agency are only looking at the severe allergies, and they're not considering people with intolerances, which can, like Jackie said, be extremely debilitating. They're sort of underestimated, and sometimes you get chefs that sabotage the meal because it's not one of the 14, such as mushrooms. They put mushrooms on top to protest that someone had an allergy.
So again, I talk about this in training.
Where people have an aversion.
Yeah, there are a lot more people with allergies. I went to Chester University recently to do some training for them. I go every year. It was retraining, and they've now got a student with severe pea protein allergy. He has an EpiPen for pea protein, and pea protein is becoming quite a big issue. So I talk about, it's just because it's not in the 14 doesn't mean it's not severely an allergic reaction for them. So we have to kind of understand that as well. And 1 in 5 children have got allergies, and not only that, it's multiple complex allergies. It's not just 1 or 2. It's across reactions of allergies.
And milk allergy is very common in children. And just because they grow out of it, that's a sort of misconception about all milk allergies, that you have it as a child and grow out of it. That's not true either. You can also go the other way and have a spontaneous allergy later in life, which even surprises environmental health officers, because they're not necessarily trained in allergy management.
No, I have the case you talked about, Megan Lee, the EHO officer that took that to court. She asked me to speak to about 60 EHO officers last January, because again, as Heather says, they don't have that level of understanding, particularly for allergens, because when they trained, it wasn't really a thing. So
the fact that there's so many children.
We all understand this danger, but some of the food handlers have no idea this is even a thing, and that is sort of assumed sometimes when talking to people.
Yeah, I mean, the fact there's so many children now with food allergies is something that I think, what concerns me is that the future for hospitality industry is looking like, because you know, this is not something that's going to go away. It's not a passing fad or anything like that. And we really need to get this right. The hospitality industry really needs to get this right, because you know, the potential consequences are really severe, both for the businesses and obviously also for people's well-being. I think
Yeah.
it's an appropriate moment to bring Jess in on at this stage. She's been waiting patiently there and just sort of dying to get in on that. So thanks for your patience, Jess. So Jess is joining us. Jess is a current operator. Actually, she's been in the hospitality industry for over 10 years. She started as a waitress working in a Malmaison, and she's worked in a number of different restaurants over the last few years. And she's currently the general manager at the Mowgli restaurant in Manchester. She studied law at university, which is where Jackie saw her, and she did a master's in business law management. And while she was also working in the hospitality industry, Jess was actually the manager working at the Almost Famous restaurant in Manchester, where in January 2015, where there was the very unfortunate incident occurred, led to the death of Shahid following a serious allergic reaction. And this event gave her experience and enabled her to coach, mentor, and train others within the industry on the importance of following regulations and processes. And she's been part of Mowgli since its early days, and it's enabled her to help influence the way in which food allergies have been managed within the Mowgli group, and obviously how it's delivered to guests. So she's a current operator, and she's in the focal point at the coal face in terms of how the hospitality industry has to face these challenges and how they are having to deal with this. So Jess, maybe you can just sort of talk us through initially about your experience, of course, first of all with Almost Famous 6 years ago, and what happened there. I mean, having to deal with that must have been a pretty traumatic experience to start with, but hopefully some kind of positives may have come out of that in terms of how the way it was approached and the way it was managed moving forward. But if you can maybe just tell us a little bit about that first of all.
Yeah, of course. So I worked in Almost Famous for around 2 years before that point. And obviously, as Jackie mentioned before, in 2014, the law changed. So Almost Famous actually put into place all the measures. They had the allergen matrix, they had all the ingredients that they needed to be listed, they had them already. We'd done training with the team, the kitchen were all aware of the steps that needed to be followed. Now, what we used to do is for tables of 6 or more, they'd get table service, and then anything under that, they'd order at the bar. So at the time, Shahida's table was a table of 5, so they ordered at the bar. She'd spoke about her allergies at the bar, and the bartender actually went and spoke to the kitchen. So they went and spoke to the head chef, who informed her of what she could have. Now, she had an allergy to milk, eggs, and nuts. So she actually asked for a chicken burger. So what we said is obviously she couldn't have it because it was dropped in buttermilk. So that was communicated back and forth, and it actually went on to the check because back then we did have the allergy matrix already. So it was processed through the till, and in big red letters they had on it dairy, milk, egg as an allergy. So it went through to the kitchen. Now Almost Famous used to run off runs, so when it was so busy, one side of the kitchen would get one side and the other would get the other side. Now the head chef was in, and as was the senior sous at the time. Now the head chef didn't end up getting the ticket, the senior sous did, but both of them had ample and adequate training. And I think that's where, when it came down to the court case, that's where Almost Famous, was able to survive, because all the training was in place and all the measures were in place. It was just a really, really bad mistake. So that had a massive knock-on effect. It had a massive effect on the team. The bartender, because the bartender felt responsible for taking that order. The person who took the food to the table, all the chefs, all the management, had a knock-on effect for months and months. As a business, the press that we got, we had people turning up. Even to this day, people still come in asking about it. The court case that continued into 3 years ago. Yeah, it was terrifying for everyone.
Did you ever find the root cause?
Yeah. So the senior sous, when they called the check, dropped the chicken. And when you say drop the chicken, we mean drop it into the fryer. And it had buttermilk in. So that was where she ate around it, and she'd not even eaten most of it, and she had the anaphylactic shock from them.
So the company escaped prosecution because they'd done what they could in terms of they'd done all their due diligence, they'd done the training, they'd done the matrix, they'd given the right information. It was down to an individual error, but there was felt there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute the chef personally.
Yeah, they didn't go down a criminal route. There's
always a risk of human error, and I think that's fair enough in all businesses, that people make mistakes.
Yeah, and people under pressure,
Yeah, even with due diligence, people have accidents. It includes food.
Yeah, but I think having the processes there make a massive difference. So currently in Mowgli, the processes are so stringent, the measures are stringent. When if a guest mentions that they've got an allergy, it's like an operation. We clean down all the areas. You use the purple boards, as Jackie mentioned. You wear aprons, you wear gloves. It's checked through by a kitchen manager. It's checked through by a front of house manager. The pass is cleaned down. When it's taken to a table, it's not taken on a tray due to cross-contamination. It's got an allergy stick in, and we just, we try as much as possible to ensure that then people aren't socially isolated. We've got management who, one of my managers is really seriously allergic to peanuts, and she says all the time, she goes into restaurants and they basically make her feel so socially isolated. They say to her, well, what do you want us to do about it? And she's just sat there like, oh, okay, I'll sit with my friends whilst they eat, and we'll watch.
Is there people you can't serve?
No. We will put it. So in the past, what we've done is change certain dishes to ensure that we can serve more people. So originally our wings had milk in. So what did we do? We tested it without milk, and it worked. We just use egg and flour, and so we've taken out one of them ingredients that don't need to be there. And I think that's where most businesses need to change. I know of other restaurants in the vicinity that just do not serve people with a gluten allergy.
Can I ask Rob a question on the same subject? Because you just said that a member of your staff is severely allergic to peanuts. So do you have a no peanuts policy on the premises? Because I have a peanut allergy friend who can't walk into a bar in case they have nuts on the bar.
No, so we don't. Yeah, no, we don't. So she's not, she's not, it's not an airborne allergy, and she's always mentioned that when she's worked there. It's if it touches her, or, touches her face. Now we do have one item with peanuts in, but she's aware of her, what she can and can't do, and she'll wash her hands, and she'll know what she can do in that situation, because she's, we've had it in the past where guests come in and say, I'm allergic to, say, gluten, for example, or nuts. Now we'll, advise them what they can and can't have, and we'll say, okay, so you definitely do not touch them. They're for your friends. And then you come downstairs and they're eating them. And now that, for us, we're like, the effects that could have on us, like, we see it, the team see it, and they think, you've just told us you're really, highly allergic, but you're eating something that you've just told us.
I bet Jackie has something to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it falls down, where you have people who come in and say they've got an allergy, and actually it's a dislike. And there's nothing wrong with having a dislike. I think they just think they get better attention if it's an allergy, and this is where if it's what, sorry?
They say they have an allergy, but they have an intolerance, so they can take the risks of may contain some people. Yeah,
but I think, if they've got a mild intolerance, they can, they know themselves how much they can have to eat, so if it's a mild intolerance and they think they can have it, then they shouldn't be making, a big fuss about it, because if they know what they can eat, for example. So we had a lady who was on directorate who, every time she said, I'm gluten free, and then one time the vice chancellor, he had this crazy idea that every time they had a different course, the director would get up and move around the tables. So bear in mind there are 8 of them out of 12 with allergies. And I came back out, and all of a sudden the directorate are getting up and moving around just to socialise and kind of talk to the other guests, which is a great idea. However, with their menu limited choices, it was difficult. And I went back out with the person's gluten-free main course to find she was on a different table tucking in. It was lamb chops with breaded herby coating. And I kind of pulled it off her and I said, you can't eat that. I won't name who it is because Jess might know. And I just said, you can't eat that. I said, this is yours. I've been running around looking for you. And she looked at it and just said, oh, this one's okay. I'll be okay with this one. And I went back in the kitchen. I won't tell you what the chef said in company. But I spoke to her afterwards and I said, Penny, that puts us in a really difficult position. I said, because we thought, oh, she don't know, I can have a little bit every now and again. But I did go and see the VC the next day because I said, this could potentially have serious consequences. I don't want you to get up and move, you know. And of course, they hadn't thought about it. They thought it was a nice gesture and it was good to communicate with tables, but massive operational issues. So I stopped the VC doing it.
My perspective on it is consumer protection. They have the right to ask for no contamination. So even if they're mildly intolerant, they still have the right to have a allergy-safe meal. And you should take every precaution. You maybe don't have to sweat it quite so much in the kitchen about airborne dust and things, but it still is a request. And if you say you can do it and serve them, that means that it should be without the thing they've asked for, even if it's an aversion. Because if I know a few chefs have protested, like they're putting mushrooms deliberately on top of something, not realising it could kill the person. But it is because some people, when they see mushrooms, want to vomit, and it actually has a physical effect on them, even though it's a psychological cause. And even that, so protecting people's well-being and providing them with what they've asked for, it's good business for a start, but it's also a consumer protection issue. So how much severity does it have to be before you take all of these precautions for allergy? And actually, because the gradients are varied individually, you have to always go with the strict allergy precautions.
My comment to my team was, because they used to have this conversation when, you know, I wonder if it's celiac, I wonder how tolerant. I said, you know, we haven't got time to worry. Just take it as a most serious scenario. And, you know, don't worry about it. If she chooses to have a sandwich tomorrow at lunchtime, that's up to her. But our dietary request is no gluten. So end off.
Because I personally am very lactose intolerant, that if they didn't take milk allergy precautions, I probably would vomit on the premises. I'm hopefully getting better at that. But I think that's the problem. It's still going to harm me, even though there'll be no lasting effect. It's still going to destroy my day. And as a food safety auditor, I can't go to work that day. It's very expensive for me. And in that way, it's a consumer protection issue because they have damages, if not injury.
Yeah, I do think a lot of restaurants now need to, you know, like we promote on rigorous training. We do, you know, written information and clear systems. And I think that's what a lot of restaurants are missing out on. And I think if they were all in place, then people would feel a lot more safe and a lot more, you know, at ease going to restaurants and knowing that, you know, they're going to clean the area, bring me the food, and I'll be safe and I'll go home and I'll feel, you know, okay the next day. But I know that a lot of restaurants are still falling short.
It's that zero or it's all or nothing, isn't it? And I think, like Jackie said, it comes down to communication. If you can communicate that we have these procedures, but we can't guarantee it to free-from standards, then that should be, we need a level of due diligence where it's guaranteed that is due diligence for the sake of the businesses. They know they've done enough and that their procedures are in place and their training's good enough. And if they can prove all of those things didn't go wrong that day, then there's still a percentage, it's still probably still a percentage risk that that day you have someone with a severe allergy. And some people with allergies suddenly have a new allergy that they didn't even know about, and they never find the root cause. So they assume that it was contaminated when actually the business can prove with the due diligence defence that their supply chain, their procedures, their staff have done everything possible, which is the standard for HACCP. You're muted, Rob.
sorry, there's so much around this this topic. You know, we could probably talk for the rest of the day, but we've got a couple of questions that have come through, and I think we just as we're sort of trying to keep to an hour on this webinar, I think we just need to address these couple of issues. Unfortunately, for you ladies, they're about Natasha's law. So you know, this is the latest thing that's been thrown at you experts. Natasha's law, and I've got my own views on it, but I'm sure you have. Actually, this one has been specifically for you, Heather. Actually, the questioner, Georgina Stewart, has asked specifically for you to answer this one. Heather, what do you think about Natasha's law, and do you think this will help towards inclusivity?
I think Natasha's law has a very good intention. It's not practical in a modern society where a very complex food system, and it's not expected that food handlers right now or chefs have the capability to label food properly. And you are very good at communicating ingredients, but that's not necessarily the level of risk. So I think all the 4 options for Natasha's law should have been implemented, because then once you have the training, Natasha's law would be doing a very good job. And there's a certain problem that the focus seems to be on what should be or should not be labelled, when actually the reason for it is to not kill people. So I think the intention should have been in the food safety law, not labelling law. Now it's a trading standards issue. And I think may contains are a nightmare because they're voluntary. Maybe they should be compulsory. The risk assessment would be very helpful, but people would need to be trained how to do a risk assessment, which is also lacking. So I think the general population should be forgiven for not knowing these things. And that's why Natasha's law has not got enough guidance of what is a due diligence defence. Do I know I'm compliant? Probably not. So they're always under the threat that basically they're in Natasha's law right now, because people don't know what to do, is encouraging them not to put it in a packet, which is worse for allergy sufferers.
Yeah. Jess, what kind of impact has Natasha's law had, if any, on your role?
So
Mowgli.
I suppose it didn't have to, but we've decided to take it on in a different route. So we're trying to stay ahead of the curve. So we've actually now implemented a label maker. So we'll upload every single ingredient for every single item that we've got in the building, and it's nice and easy. So all the chefs need to do is press print, and then they'll print every single label, and then they will label every single item in that kitchen. With what the allergies are. We don't have substitutions, and if we do, then I upload them. So we could sometimes have 2 different chat masalas. We have 2 different chat masalas, so if we get a different chat masala in, we just upload it because it's instant. You'd upload it, and then it's printed to everybody in the company. So that's just us trying to stay ahead a little bit.
What about when you put dips in a pot? This one bothers me. If you put little individual portions of dip
for a guest at the table.
Yeah, this is a big problem that I've heard, is if the packet is so small you can't label it, there's not actually an explanation whether you should or shouldn't label it. And I don't need to. There is an explanation.
There is an explanation. If it's below a certain diameter, it's physically impossible to put a label on. However, the rule is that you must have the information nearby, or they must be able to communicate with you. So if it's, say, a Caesar salad dressing in a little tiny pot, you physically can't put a label on it, but there must be, a signposting to please ask for information about this, and that is on the FSA website, I think, somewhere. But we did clarify that recently with them.
I haven't seen that guidance. That would be very sensible.
Yeah. So when I do the training, I always say, if you can have a conversation with them, then it doesn't need the label, because you're talking to them and encouraging them to ask questions. If you can't have a conversation, i.e. sandwich on a shelf, because if you go to Double Weight Smiths, I know they don't make their own sandwiches, but the principles of getting your lunch of a sandwich, crisps and a drink, and then going to ask the lady with the magazines, what's in this sandwich, won't work.
Do you think that's impossible, Rob?
Listen, I just
define what is in communication with and what isn't.
Yeah,
because I know a lot of places like school dinners, they want to put packed lunches in a paper bag, and then they have to put full ingredients of all the ingredients, such as packaged food inside. Yeah.
Because we've been talking about this recently. And with packed lunches or in schools in particular, the website has the menu information beforehand. They know exactly which children have an allergy, and they will have their bags separately with identification on there. So
how do people know
that is one thing with in a controlled environment like a school, where, like you say, they know their audience. It is a lot easier. I've got a question actually from Ray West about schools. Actually, how does Natasha's Law work with cakes produced and pre-packed, for example, in cling film by parents and sent in for cake sales, or made by the PTA or in food tech for the same reason? If these cakes were purchased pre-packed from a supplier for provision in schools, they would come under the new legislation. But what about cakes wrapped by parents for school use, please?
Actually, this week I've been at the LACER conference, and actually I was on a panel debate with Natasha's parents, and the concern in the room, which I echoed, was that always the blame falls on the caterer, because if something happens to the child, they assume it's the caterer, and there are far too many other areas like this example where it's entirely not their fault. So, for example, in care homes, I've been working with a care home group where they've actually put a policy in place so that if relatives bring cakes from home, or Auntie Nellie makes a cake or brings in a meal or whatever, they need to actually identify the ingredients, because this is the risk. So if there's a cake sale for charity or whatever it might be, the person that sends in those cakes, biscuits or whatever should also send an ingredient list. And allergy, they may not know the allergens because it's not their profession, but somebody should check them. But there is, the communication outside the catering department, they don't always know about allergens in school and other departments.
No, so if a parent's made some cakes and sent it in, they just need to send a list with the ingredients. They don't have to label the cake necessarily, but it should have a list of ingredients at least. How would you suggest?
It's widespread in the independents that even the businesses don't know about Natasha's Law. So I think it's quite nice to ask parents to understand it.
I know.
Not on Southern.
How would you suggest managing allergies in an office environment? This is from Naomi Daltrey. Managing allergies in an office environment. There you go.
I can answer this really easy. You treat it as a disability and you accommodate.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. I like a short answer.
I've started
I hope that, and actually that also answers. Sorry, Jackie, go on.
I've started to include in training that actually when you have new people starting to work with you, ask at the induction stage, do you have any allergies we need to know about? And this is because when I trained recently in a care home, there was a young 19-year-old carer who died on the doorstep of the care home because she hadn't told anybody about her allergies. They had nothing in place and they were handing cakes out at the end of the day. And that happened a few years ago, and the lady who told me was still visibly upset about that. So I say young people who are the age group that we've predominantly got allergies, now entering the workplace, you need to ask it as you would with any other medical questionnaire, and then put something in place.
It's also an inclusion, because if you have a work function or after work drinks or anything like that, even including if they avoid alcohol or anything like that, sober shaming and all of these other things, it is a workplace well-being issue and discrimination issue if you haven't catered for them as part of the workforce. And it's this predictability. There's always going to be people with allergies, intolerances, religions or beliefs that you have to consider when you hire them.
And the last question from Mark Bauer, and I think we've already answered this, and is severe food allergy classed as a disability?
It is.
And I think the answer is yes. It's a medical condition. So, we've answered that.
Argue it's not just severe allergy, it's also intolerances. And I think that's the problem, is this misconception that it's not severe.
Okay, well, that's all the questions, and amazingly and brilliantly, though I say myself, that takes us for our hour. So I think we need to draw a line under it there. So I just want to say thank you ever so much to Jess, to Heather, and to Jackie for your contributions today, and thank you for everyone for taking part and getting involved today. Thank you for those questions. Particular thanks, obviously, to those who've joined who are possibly not IIRSM members, and hopefully we can encourage you to sign up as members. There's some new information coming out soon that I just need to mention to you. Look out in your inboxes. those of you who are current members about the different gradings now of membership that are coming out shortly, which basically opens up the opportunities for membership, which are not just going to be based on sort of academic qualifications. So enables more people to get involved, and any students who can actually join for free, which is fantastic, and there's lots of opportunity. So as the Yorkshire and Humberside branch, this is the first of our webinars, so hopefully you've found it interesting. We've got lots more that we're going to plan over the next year or so, as well as our regular meetings. So those of you who are in the Yorkshire and Humberside region, please look out for those, and we hope to have some interesting speakers on those as well. Thanks once again to our contributors, and thank you to Donna for organising it. Are you still there, Donna?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Donna, for organising it. And the recording is, well, it has been recorded, and thank you. How do we get hold of the recording, Donna? If anybody who's kind of coming halfway through or whatever wants to play it back.
So it will be on the IIRSM official YouTube channel.
Brilliant. Watch yourself on YouTube tonight, Heather. You know, I know you've got plenty of records on there already, but you know, you can never have too many, can you? So thanks again.
Time, Rob. Well done for the first webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Weekend.
Thanks. All right.
Bye.
Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.